Cheers. This is Ray Capote for the Misfits Mystique. So in the first episode, I discussed how I first discovered the Misfits. In the second episode, I discussed how Arthur Miller came about writing the story. And in this episode, we're going to be discussing the actual story. So Miller wrote the short story back in 1956, and then it was published in Esquire magazine October 1st, 1957. In the short story, it's a little bit different than the book. The character of Roslin Tabor, which Marilyn Monroe played, was not a very big part in the book. It was the older cowboy, Gay Langland, played by Clark Gable. The younger cowboy, played by Montgomery Clift, and his name is Perce Howland. In real life, Miller met a third cowboy on that trip, and he was replaced by Eli Wallach's character, Guido. So Guido was a mechanic and also a pilot. In real life, in the guys they met, it was the second guy, the younger cowboy, that was the pilot. So that's really the only change. And in the book, the Marilyn Monroe character of Roslin is the focal point of the book and the screenplay and the movie, Roslin Tabor. So the movie starts out with Guido driving his truck, and he pulls into a driveway, and he sees this 1959 Cadillac convertible that was severely damaged. And by the way, I believe this movie had a lot of it was cursed from the very beginning. A lot of things went wrong, and I think it got off to a really bad start because the grips actually hammered this 1959 Cadillac convertible and completely damaged it. The left rear fin, the front left quarter panel, and they could have easily just, taken a Cadillac from a junkyard and put it in there. So why they did that, I don't know. So I think that was me as a classic car person. Can't believe they did that. But he drives up and he's assessing the damage. Isabel, played by Thelma Ritter, comes out, the owner of the boarding house, and she says, she should get a good price for it, It's almost brand new. Only had like 10 miles or something. So Eli Wallach is reviewing the damage. That's Guido. And Marilyn Monroe pops her head out from the second story window. That'd be Roslin Tabor. And she's seeking a divorce. And she says, how much time do we have? Do I have 5 minutes? I'll be ready in 5 minutes. So Guido assesses the damage, and Thelma Ritter goes upstairs, and that's the second scene of the movie, is they're inside a room in the boarding house. And Roslin Tabor is talking to Isabel, the owner of the boarding house, and they're discussing, she's like trying to memorize some lines, like trying to lie basically that her husband beat her and abused her. And basically she just tries to memorize these lines as best she can. She didn't want to lie, but Isabel said, you're gonna have to. They don't care. It's like these laws here are a joke. The judge will pass you. Don't worry about it. So Guido offers to give him a ride, and they go down to the courthouse. And when they get there, Guido offers, he's very mesmerized by Roslin Tabor, by her beauty and her charisma. And by the way, each of these characters were designed by Arthur Miller to reflect very much how they were in real life. So the role of Roslin was very close to Marilyn Monroe in real life. She's sensitive and she's very caring. She's beautiful. Gay Langland, played by Clark Gable, is a pragmatist, and he refuses to give in. He's very strict on the things that he will do. Like Gable in real life would not take a role if he didn't believe in it. Even if the part was good, he said if the whole story, the main thing for him was a story, that's why he got along very well with Miller, because he loved the story. He wouldn't take the part. And Gay Langland, one of the things he would always say is, I haven't changed. It's the world around me that has changed. So he's a principled guy. And then Montgomery Clift, he's kind of a wild and happy-go-lucky guy. And that's Perce Howland. And he's very similar to the way he is in real life, or was in real life. In fact, director John Huston said that he was really pleased with Montgomery Clift, the way he played that part, and with all the actors that were in it. So they get to the courthouse, and Guido says to Roslin, "Hey, there's beautiful country out here. You should check it out sometime. I'll be happy to take you." So right away, he's trying to pick her up. And by the way, the damage to the Cadillac was because all these guys were trying to get to know Roslin. She's driving around Reno, and they get so close to her car that they damaged it. So that was one of the first punchlines of the movie. And she kind of blows them off. She walks up the steps, and in a separate video, I'll show all these places that were filmed in Reno. This is the Washoe County Courthouse, and I was there. And she walks up, and her husband, Raymond Tabor, is standing there. And he's trying to he flew in, he's trying to convince her not to get the divorce. And she said, if I'm going to be alone, I'd rather be by myself. Because this guy is a businessman, and it's played by Kevin McCarthy. And by the way, he was in one of my other favorite movies, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. So I thought that was very interesting. And he says, "Hey kid, it's okay." And it's funny he said kid, because, Monroe at this time was like 34 years old. But why don't you change your mind? And she said, "You're not going to make me feel sorry for myself anymore." So she gets the divorce. The next scene it shows Guido driving up to a railroad crossing, and the bar comes down and the lights are flashing. He looks over and he sees his buddy Gay Langland over with this lady, and he's seeing her off. She's catching a train back to St. Louis, and she's really distraught. And again, these misfits, Gable, Montgomery Clift, and Guido, they're kind of womanizers. So they're itinerant workers. They get a job from here and there, as in a rodeo or whatever they can find. And so Gable is talking to this lady, and it's like his latest conquest or whatever, and he's seeing her off, and she says, "Why don't you come out to St. Louis with me?" He says, "I'm not cut out for business." And he says goodbye to her, goes over to Guido, who's over at there's red light, and he tells him, "You know what? I got to get out of this town." And I'm a lot like him. I like to get out into the country and go camping and go fishing and get out into the mountains and wilderness whenever I can, especially in the summertime. So I know exactly what he's talking about, a little change of scenery. And he says, "No guys or gals." And that cracked me up. So he just about had it. These are wanderers, they're kind of on the fringe of society. That's why they call them the misfits. They don't take wages. It's like a horrible word in this movie, wages. At least it's not wages. So no 9-to-5 jobs for these guys. They live free out in the West, and they do what they want when they want. basically. And Guido says, Gay, I just met a girl sweet enough to eat. And he's talking about Roslin, played by Monroe. And so they decide, hey, you know, let's talk about it as far as going chasing some Mustangs. That's what they love to do. Guido and him would go up into the hills, and Guido is the mechanic but also pilot. He would drive the Mustangs out, and Langland with someone else would go out there, and when they bring him in, they'd be on a flatbed truck, and they rope him from the truck with tires attached to the rope, and then when the Mustang is roped, they run off, but the weight of the tire will eventually stop them, and then they tie him, and then the next day a dealer will pick him up. The key with Langland is before the war, World War II, he would do the same, but they were sold as ponies for kids, but now the dealers sell them for dog food, and that's the crux, the big conflict in this movie, because Marilyn Monroe's character was totally against killing these Mustangs, these wild horses, and they should roam free, and I agree with her. In fact, John Huston said, you know, she's all sensitivity in this movie, and the audience will totally side with her and not with Langland, even though he's more practical and he knows someone else will kill him anyway if I don't. But there's only, you know, before the 50s there were thousands of these everywhere, and now the Wranglers had wiped them out. And when Miller wrote the short story in '56, there was only, you know, a few here, a few there, pack of 20 or 15 over there, so they were really dying off. So anyway, he says to Guido, Gay Langland, I'll meet you over at Harrah's. And I was there. It's only like a couple blocks from the train station in Reno, the downtown train station. So the next scene, they show Isabel and Roslin walking up to the Truckee Bridge, which is in downtown Reno. And she got the divorce, but she's pretty distraught. And Isabel says, why don't you throw your ring in the river? It'll give you good luck. And she asks her, did you do that? And she goes, no, I lost it on my honeymoon. And I thought that was stupid. You got this gold, you know, diamond ring. You're going to throw it in, and now you're probably going to need the money. You're better off selling it. So Roslin says, let's go get some drinks. So that was kind of a constant theme in this movie, which I thought was really cool. And I'll go into that in another video, all the different drinks that they had in this movie. So at Harrah's, they show Marilyn Monroe and Isabel sitting down. They go and have a couple drinks, and then they look over and she sees a dog, Roslin does, and that's Gay Langland's dog, Tom Dooley. And Thelma Ritter is talking to her, trying to console her, and say, you know, you can stay here. You don't have to go back to Chicago. And the Monroe character was like this nightclub dancer, and you could teach dancing at elementary school. I thought that was pretty funny. You know, stripper, so to speak, apparently, or just a nightclub dancer is going to teach dancing at a school, but she's trying to get her friend to stay in Reno. Tom Dooley comes over, that's Gay Langland's dog. He turns around, hey, Tom Dooley, don't bother those people. And that's when Guido sees Isabel and Roslin. And they walk over, Guido introduces Gay to them, and Gay said, you were right, you know, when Guido said, you know, I met a girl that was good enough to eat. He says, for once you were right, and, you know, he's really taken by the beauty of Roslin. And so they sit down, and so Isabel and Roslin, so Isabel ordered rye with water, and Roslin ordered scotch on ice. and I'll go over that in another episode. But right away, when they sit down, I thought this is a recurring theme in the movie, where they just waste these drinks. Gay Langland says to the waitress, apparently knows everyone there, "Hey Mary, get us 4 doubles." 4 doubles, right? So Guido and Gay already had their drinks up there. Who knows if they finished that, then the ladies just took a sip and they're already ordering 4 doubles, and they never drank that, which is, that's Hollywood. And they're talking about, you know, what she planned to do if she was employed. She says, "No, I never graduated high school." And Gay Langland said, "Oh, that's a good thing, because all these women that he meets that go out there for divorces are always picking his brain, asking him questions, and he just wants nothing to do with that." And they were discussing that, you know, it's a beautiful country out there, and Roslin says, "Well, what do you do out there in the country? What's there to do?" And Gay Langland says, "Well, you wake up, you see what kind of a day it is, you throw rocks at a can, you fry yourself some eggs." And so she said, I thought it was funny, she said, "I know what you mean." Guido tells her, "Hey, I have a ranch house in the country, it's empty." His wife had died, and he was adding a bedroom to it, and he says, "You know, you can stay there if you want. Think it over before you decide what you're going to do." And she says, Roslin says, "Oh, sure, let's go, Isabel. Let's go check it out. Let's go check out the country, and I'll rent a car." And it turns out to be a 1958 Chrysler station wagon. So, you know, I'm a classic car guy. So they get in the next scene. They show them driving out to the country, and Roslin and Isabel are following Gay Langland and Guido in their flatbed GMC truck, Gay Langland's truck. And they're driving out there, and Isabel warns Roslin, "You know, these are cowboys, just be a little, they're about as reliable as jackrabbits, so just keep your eyes and ears open." So they get out to the ranch, and I was there as well. It's called the Sticks Ranch, and this would be Guido's ranch house in the movie. And they all get there, they walk in, Guido shows them around, shows them the view out the front door. And that's how I knew that I found this place. The house doesn't exist anymore. I don't know if it was torn down or burned down or whatnot, but it wasn't there, and there were some trees there, and then a hill, and then you look out towards the north, and the scene was, I picked out the topography, the landscaping was identical to the scene in the movie, so I know that's where it was. And, you know, Google Maps tells you that as well. They walk in, they go to the rear bedroom, and Guido has a picture of his wife, and he says, you know, she died because she was pregnant with his baby, real tragic story. And he was going to drive her to the hospital, but he got a flat tire, and she died. And Roslin, the character that Marilyn Monroe was playing, was pretty distraught over that story. And so they walked back to the living room, and Isabel goes, you know, does anyone want any of this whiskey I bought? And so they're cracking that open, and that was Walker's Deluxe. And she pours it out, and so that's the end of part one of the story and the plot of the Misfits. And my name is Ray Capote for the Misfits Mystique. Good night.